to the webinar, just a couple additional logistics. And I just want to underline or underscore two things that Malavan just mentioned. So one is that I have maybe 15 or 20 minutes of material to share. So I don't have a ton of material. I have some thoughts. I absolutely have some thoughts and ideas for us to talk about. But what will be really magical and will make this a really great use of time, everybody's time, is if we participate. So to the degree that you can ask questions, give perspective, give your experience, I think that will be an enriching for everybody. So that's an important piece of this. The other thing is, like I mentioned, please, besides participate, chat in your questions if that's what you want to do. If you're able to have your web cameras on when you're actually talking or raising your questions, please do that. Otherwise, please mute your mic, okay? So that's just a little bit about kind of context for this. So I hope all of you kind of signed up for this particular webinar. It's the vital role of the human resources leader in organizational success. If you didn't sign up for this webinar, then you're in the wrong room and on the wrong day. But if you have, then you're in the right place. And my name is Michael Burchell, and I am a partner with Great Place to Work in the Middle East. So I've been a CEO, I've advised CEOs, and I think that's particularly kind of what I bring to this conversation is my experience with that. And so that is the lens that I will have as we go through this material together. I do think that this is hosted by Great Place to Work. Great Place to Work is a global survey certification firm, and I'll get more into that in a moment. I'll just briefly kind of highlight some of that, but that's not the intent, is to talk with you about kind of our model, our methodology, our framework. That's a different conversation for another day if you want to talk with Malavan. What I'm really interested in talking with you about today is kind of the human resources leader, and where do we get it right and where do we not get it right? And in my experience, quite often what happens is that there's lots of data that backs this up, is that talent is seen as a really important strategic issue for a lot of executives, a lot of CEOs, and yet the role of the human resources group and function is not kind of brought up to bear. And I think that's something for us to really spend some time thinking about and talking about as a community. So that's really the intent of today's webinar. So Great Place to Work, just for those of you who are less familiar with us, our mission is to build a better world by helping organizations become great workplaces for all. And that's really kind of, we have a very focused social mission. We're about making a better world through that process. And we do that through a primary set of interventions. So one thing is that we kind of help organizations assess where they are currently. We certify and help role model the best workplaces, and we create opportunities for great workplaces and others to learn from each other and share their perspective. So that's really kind of what we're in the business of doing. And we do have a model, and I think this is important because it'll come back as we kind of get towards the end, but our For All model is really around a couple different things that HR can do to really help drive business. And that is to support a way in which anybody and everybody can innovate, where values actually live in an organization, and that leaders are effective and are able to do what they need to do to kind of accomplish the goals of the organization, all in a spirit of trust. And trust is actually one of the things that comes up again and again in our research and other research as a fundamental building block of successful organizations. And then how do you maximize human potential? How do you get everybody to engage in the life and the business of the organization? And we'll talk about that because actually that's one of the keys for successful human resources. So our agenda really is about looking at this challenge today and why it matters. And then we'll talk a little bit about, I'll kind of give a little bit of an HR roadmap and some things to think about as you go off and you reflect this evening and get prepared for the week ahead. The outcomes for our webinar, our short webinar, is to really examine the role of the HR leader, what gets in the way, explore how HR, all of you, can lead the workplace of the future, and what are some specific actions to really help create and drive value. Okay, so that's really kind of the focus for our conversation. So as a way to begin this, what I'd love to do is actually just have you take a moment and reflect as a leader, what issues keep you up at night? What issues keep you up at night? And just take a moment now and chat, if you will, into the chat box so we can see it. Kind of what are the things that kind of keep you up at night? Would love to kind of see that. What issues do you struggle with? What issues do you think about as a human resources leader? What are the things that kind of keep you up at night? If you just want to chat those in. And Malavan, just so you know, I haven't forgotten the poll questions. We'll get to those in a second. But yeah, if you can just take a moment and just kind of chat in the chat box, those things that kind of keep you up at night. Inspection, yeah. Yes, this is the chat box, Rosanna. This is the chat box. Employee morale, absolutely. Introducing change. What are other things that keep you up at night? Chat those in. Yes, this is the chat box. Adapting to evolving needs, employee expectations, laws and regulatory compliance. Presentations like this one, right? Yes, Swati, this is the chat box. Exits, so people leaving the organization, I assume. Retaining top talent. This is that's great. Retention, Christine, absolutely. Attrition, so people leaving the organization, so that's retaining the talent that we have. Other things that can keep you up at night. For me, it's employee turnover and employee welfare. Oh yeah, Swati, absolutely.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mike.
Yeah.
I'm trying to identify where the chat box is all about.
The chat box, maybe Malvan can share, but
able to see question and answer.
Just above the poll, you'll find an icon Q&A with a question mark.
That's a question and answer zone.
Yeah.
Same
yes,
thing, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Giving the right salary for people I'm hiring in Lebanon. Ooh. As inflation is making it impossible to know how much people are paid on paper. Yep. Yeah. So particularly if your economy is like Lebanon, right? And there's a couple other economies in the Middle East where it's just a real struggle to figure out like what is market and how do we pay people, right? New challenges in the future, regulations, staying relevant and sustainable in the new normal. Right. And we're still trying to figure out what the new normal is, right? So well-being. Any additional thoughts? Brilliant. Those are excellent. And I think it's interesting because I do believe that all of those issues are absolutely critical in terms of HR success, in terms of people success, and how organizations are thinking about how do we actually address the current moment and build for the future, right? So I totally understand exactly kind of where you're coming from with that. When I think about the issues for leaders today, the CEOs that I advise and that I speak with, they actually have about 5 different issues that come up consistently in every conversation I have. So one is related to talent. How do I get people back to work and productive? Right? Because right now we're still kind of figuring out like what's the impact of the pandemic on our ability to get work done, right? And a lot of people have lived the last year and a half online, and even those who are kind of weren't actually working from home or office, but actually had to be someplace in a plant or other facility. Kind of the idea of health and welfare, and somebody said well-being, is absolutely essential. So CEOs are wondering, how do we get people back to work and productive, even still given kind of the pandemic that continues, right? As well as some of the geopolitical stuff that is going on across the world as well. So what's that? The second issue is, how do I actually address kind of the key bits of our shareholder value? What's our board agenda in terms of driving value for the organization? If I'm in a public entity, a government agency, how do I actually maximize value for our constituency, our various stakeholders? So that kind of shareholder value is probably the second biggest issue, right? And they're connected. You know, their talent and the shareholder value issues. The third is, where is the ship, you know, in terms of the global economy headed, and how do I actually get there quick, right? So again, different kind of geopolitical, all you need to do is read The Economist or other magazines about what's going on in terms of the global economy, and chief executives are really thinking through how do we make sure that we're taking 2 steps ahead. And then the fourth issue is really around how organizations are evolving and changing. So the disruption of digital change and technology, right? In terms of how people do work and where they work and what our work product looks like. And then also kind of the transformation that happens in terms of just thinking about how organizations then align themselves to all of that. So all those things are issues that leaders are kind of trying to address and grapple with today. And in each one of those, you know, people leaders such as yourself have an important role to play, right? Let me kind of stop there and see if there's any kind of questions or reactions to any of that. Thoughts? Okay. And you can always take yourself off mute as well. I see a hand like this. This is good. Somebody's using your reactions. This is good. So those are the things that we're kind of seeing, and I appreciate your willingness to kind of like also share with us kind of what you're seeing and what you're thinking about. It's an important element. I'm going to actually shift our thinking just a little bit in terms of, you know, what's important versus what is valuable from a CEO perspective, because those are 2 different things. It could be absolutely important from a human resources perspective, but then what's valuable from a CEO perspective? And those are 2 different questions, right? So before we move on though, I want to kind of, we now actually have a fair number of people in the room. We have well over 50 people kind of in the webinar. So I think now's the time, best time, right, Malavan, to actually do a poll and see kind of who's with us. So I'm going to, let's see. Do you want to work that, Malavan? Because I'm looking at how to do the polls here.
Okay.
Like,
Okay, publish the results. Okay.
there's 3
Just
questions.
publish the poll.
Yep. Oh, let's see, result. Okay, so what country are you based in? I don't know if everybody can see this. I'm hoping everybody can see this. 46% are in Qatar, 11 in Saudi, 7% Saudi, 11% UAE. No friends from Kuwait or Oman or Bahrain today. 19% or 5 voted for another Middle East country, and then 15 for somewhere else. Somewhere else in this wide world. That's great. That's great.
Okay, very good.
Malavan, do you want to start the next one?
Sure, yes.
Just kind of click start. And that is, what is your interest in this webinar? So there's a couple different options. It's kind of a forced choice. You can choose one. What is most important to you in this webinar? We'll give it 20 seconds, and then we'll publish the results.
I think, Michael, we did announce if they're not participating, we can't get the certificate, isn't it?
Yeah, you only get the participation certificate actually if you answer the polls. We'll give it 20 more seconds. 15 seconds. 10. 5 seconds. All right, do you want to publish the results? What do we have?
Yes.
All right, so the biggest group are just all of you are looking for ways to increase your effectiveness as human resources professionals, right? Which is great. Okay. Yeah, Christine? No?
Sorry, that was by mistake. I'm sorry.
No worries. Thanks, Christine. All right. So then let's go back to the list.
Michael, just a second. Michael, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Naveen had raised his hand. Naveen, please go ahead. Naveen Tariq.
Hey, once again.
He wasn't just exercising.
Hi, Naveen.
Oh, no.
Hey, so here I want to share some of my knowledge, but before that, I want to ask what is effectuation in terms of HR perspective?
What in terms of HR perspective? Say that one more time.
Effectuation.
Effectuation.
Yeah, it's like providing a way to control a future that is inherently unpredictable, like as we have pandemic.
I mean, that's a really great question, because I do think that human resources has a vital role to play in being agile.
Yeah. But like talking in terms of HR perspective, like we have agility in the term effectuation. So how do you relate it with the HR and HR and entrepreneurs?
I think Eli is
Michael, just a second. Can I request all the participants to mute their mic? So keep it unmuted only if you're going to ask a question. Thank you very much.
My maid have some emergency in the hospital, so she's
What's that?
My maid has emergency in the hospital, she's leaving.
We're still able to hear you, my guy.
What time are you?
Uh,
What time did you come today?
Eli, could you mute your mic, please?
I just muted him. Okay. So I think I'm interested in hearing your perspective, Naveen, because I think for me the issue is around kind of how do you remain agile, and this is the issue for HR leaders constantly, right? So there's that 2x2 grid, right? So what's important and what's urgent, right? And we need to make sure that we're always kind of focusing on what's important, right?
Yeah.
And the important is not always urgent, but then there's the urgent stuff that pops up, and how do we actually address that in real time, right?
Yeah.
Because if we don't, we're going to be in trouble for that. So I do think that kind of agility is an important skill to have. And then how do you actually bring the right resources to problem solving? We could probably do a whole
exactly.
on problem solving from that kind of perspective, and make decisions to help address that as quickly as we can, so we can move back to what's important and urgent.
Technique to resolve the issue.
Say that again, Naveen, because I think that's important.
The technique of resolving issues that are occurring due to uncertainty.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. And like I said, we can actually do a whole webinar. And if people are interested in that, please let Malavan know. We can do a
Thank
whole
you.
webinar.
I appreciate.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep. We have one more quick poll that I wanted to do. And so, Malavan, if you can do that, just we want to understand kind of like people's background in human resources. If you want to just quickly put in your response to that, and then I have some additional content we want to get through. So just kind of respond to the poll that's in front of you. "15 seconds. Wow. So as we kind of wrap up this poll, please continue to vote. What's interesting is that many of us actually have a degree in human resources, and this is our chosen field, right? or they don't have a degree, but this is still their chosen field. So you've made a deliberate choice to be in the people space, right? And that's a whole different conversation too about like, why did you get involved in people and human resources and that kind of stuff? Everybody has a story to tell, right? Everybody has a story to tell. But I do think the very fact that there's a lot of us that were just not necessarily placed here, but have chosen to be here, kind of creates this interesting moment where we have learned through our experience in human resources a particular language, a particular philosophy, particular way of looking at things. And sometimes that is helpful to us, and sometimes that's not helpful to us. So we'll get into that as we go, okay? We can hide those results, Malavan, and then let's just kind of move forward into this conversation. So here's the thing. Talent tops the CEO agenda. Here's some examples. I just quickly pulled, you can go online, you can Google, talent and CEO agenda, and you will see lots of things kind of pop to the very top of your Google search, right? Or your Bing search or whatever your browser search is, right? The top left here is a PwC research. CEOs are increasingly worried about finding talent with the right skills, and it continues year over year over year over year. Right now, I think this is a 2019 study, 63% of CEOs are concerned about availability of key skills. So we see this continuing to be an issue for CEOs, right? How do we actually get the best and brightest to our organization? How do we keep everybody engaged, right? And how do we actually ensure that we're able to put the right people on the right projects at the right time for the right resources, right? There was another study that was done, you can see down here by Deloitte and Fortune magazine, the bottom right-hand side. The biggest challenge I face as a CEO is, and you can see talent, climate, innovation, pace of change, COVID recovery, uncertainty, right? Regulatory environment within that little word cloud. Those are the things that pop to the top. And so we have CEOs, and every one of those issues, here's the thing, every single one of those issues, right, has something to do with your work as people leaders, as the leaders of the human resources function or area, right? And you can see some of the quotes from different CEOs. High skill technology, talent strategies, balance between moving too fast and moving not fast enough. And a quote from a CEO from the Middle East region, over half of the population in our region is under the age of 24. And that's great in terms of an opportunity, but it's also a huge challenge, right? And how do we think about that? And again, the role of human resources is to lead. There's actually a really great study, and you can read it in Harvard Business Review. Ram Charan and a couple other folks wrote an article not that long ago about the critical role, the criticality of human resources, and that they were actually saying it's almost important as the CFO. And in fact, CEO should be thinking like a G3, like a kind of a group of three, right? So the CEO, the CFO, and the CHRO. Like those are the three people that really need to make things happen in the business. What's interesting though, is that that's not always the case, right? That's not always the case. In fact, that's relatively not the case, right? So CEOs don't necessarily consistently see HR as being substantive contributors of value. 41% of CEOs see their HR leaders as reactionary, right? So this transactional, like something happens, I react to it, I resolve it, I move on. I react to it, I resolve it, I move on, right? And 34% of CEOs felt that their HR leaders are well prepared to capitalize on those trends that we just talked about. All the stuff that you were talking about at the very beginning, like what keeps you up at night, right? How do we actually address those issues? What Naveen was talking about in terms of being anticipatory and being agile, right? And thinking about what we need to do and how to problem solve. Most CEOs don't see us being prepared for that, right? In fact, 9% say HR folks are not prepared at all. They're not even the right field. They're not even the right ballpark around this, right? They're in a total different universe. 9% of CEOs. So that's 1 in 10, right? But over 3 in 10 believe that, only 3 in 10 believe that CEOs actually are well prepared. So that leaves 70% that do not believe that human resources folks are prepared for this. Right? That's a challenge. That's a huge challenge for us, right? So if CEOs see talent as a top priority, then why do CEOs also not see HR as able to step up and lead? And for this, I have thoughts. I have lots of thoughts, but I'm really interested in hearing from this group, kind of why do you think this is the case? Why is it that we have CEOs who say, yeah, I mean, in order for us to be successful, we have to make sure that, talent is addressed. And at the same time, yeah, our HR folks are not really kind of well equipped for that. What do we think is going on here? Feel free to chat it in, raise your hand, unmute yourself, talk. Malavan will facilitate all that. But I really am interested in hearing from all of you, like, why do we think this is the case? Why do we think this is the case?
Hello?
Ibrahim.
Yeah, maybe because we're not given the proper resources to do so. So let's say, for example, we have a need to hire such and such. We're given a specific, either a deadline or we're not very well informed either on the salary scale or on the profile we're looking for. So we're kind of left in the dark to just assume what they would want us to go for. And sometimes we don't get it right.
Yep. Yep.
So that's from my side. Maybe that's.
Yep. I think that makes a lot of sense. That's a great point. And and Ibrahim, I want to come back to that too, because I think that's absolutely part of it. What else? Why else do you think people are doing this? Who else?
Hi.
Zani.
I think the role of HR is changing, and I think navigating this change and needs time to trust that the HR will be able to lead with the strategy of the organization and the leadership. And I think there's a paradigm shift, especially after the pandemic. There's so many articles written about this, and I think it's navigating this and dealing with the uncertainty of the situation. I think that's what's coming up to mind right now.
That's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely right. I think this, and I think there is quite a bit around how the.
Hey, can I add?
Yeah, please, Naveen. Yeah.
CEOs constantly make decisions and take actions, whereas HR are more likely to counsel people. That is why, in my opinion.
So HR is in the business of counseling people and helping to support people, and that's necessarily lead to the decision making. That could absolutely be part of it. I want to go to what Anna said. I think kind of like the current moment we find ourselves also complicates matters, right?
Absolutely.
Like you said,
If I can add as well, maybe sometimes if the CEOs see HR as not that essential, and if we are proactive, sometimes it can come back to bite us. So like you'll think of something that would maybe of help, and you, let's say, do something proactive that should help, and you see a few people, and someone from here tells you why, you know what I mean, and you just stay put, and if they ask something, you do it. So like it doesn't really encourage you to be proactive.
Yes.
Can I ask?
Yeah, Christine.
Yes, building on what has been just said, I think CEOs usually used to view the HR department or presence as transactional and not as strategic. But due to what happened with the pandemic and all the learnings and the importance of humanizing the organization, I think HR will play a huge role in that. And it sometimes also falls on the responsibility falls on the HR director or the HR department per se to be more proactive and to be more agile and to be more up to the trends that are happening. Because sometimes if the CEO does not feel or see the value, they have to show it themselves. This is what I think.
I agree. That's
Mr. Mike, can I?
Point.
Mr. Mike, can I?
Yes, Dr. Rabi.
Yeah. if the CEO has been recruited before HR, I feel he has got a little strong point to lead HR towards the positive growth. If the CEO has been recruited after HR, whether signing or resigning, again he has to approach HR. So this is an area where we call it as blind spot. We sometimes we forget to see certain facts.
Yes, that's right. Dr. Ravi, I think that's a really great point, and Christine made a great point too. There's also some amazing points here being made in the chat, the Q&A section. So someone said, because all functions expect HR to know what ops are doing, but no one wants to know how HR operates or what info HR needs in order to give back to the business. And another person said, I would say one of the reasons where the HR is less engaged in what happens on the floor and more prone to process and systems, right? That's why and another person said, sometimes there's a conflict between decisions between CEO and HR. So those are all really, really great points. And I think this is a really valuable discussion, because I think to really understand and get at where's the disconnect. One study I was looking at looked at how the percentage of CEOs that thought that their HR people were ready versus the number of HR people that thought they were ready. And the HR folks that thought they were ready and able to take on stuff was 20% higher than the CEOs, right? So HR folks, what I'm trying to say delicately is that HR has a really great perceptions of itself, and CEOs have a less perceptions of that. So it leads me to actually kind of like two different thoughts, right? So the first thought is that CEOs, if we think about kind of this issue, it could either be one of two reasons. Either CEOs don't have a fair appreciation for the role that human resources is and what they can do. And I think Ibrahim mentioned that at the very onset, like, are they kind of resourced appropriately and are they given the opportunity, right? So that's one thing, does a CEO and the executive team have that wide sense of vision to think about, like, okay, talent is key, I need to be thinking about this. And I have run into some CEOs, not a lot, but I've run into CEOs that see people as kind of dispensable, right? Plug one in, plug one out. There's such an interesting economy in some parts of the Middle East where you just kind of like, if this person doesn't work, you just kind of swap them out for a person over here. But I would say that most CEOs understand the issue of talent, right? And that talent drives the organization. The other issue possibly is that we just don't have the language and the skill set to drive that conversation the way we want to, right? So it's either us as HR leaders or it's them, right? I mean, it could be something else, but typically that's one of the two things. And I think we need to get really clear about what's actually driving some of these perceptions. And there's a different set of solutions or how we address that problem based upon whether our perception or our belief is, hey, we actually are not bringing our best and full self to the table, or B, the CEO and the executive team just doesn't have a complete understanding and appreciation because what they've seen from us is managing payroll and benefits, right? So that's what they do, rather than being a strategic contributor to the business. Okay, I'm not sure if that makes sense. I don't see any kind of thumbs ups or thumbs down, but I'm hoping that what I just said kind of makes sense.
One more thing I would like to add, that that diversify HR from a CEO is the power of their interaction. The power of interaction in HR builds up a team, whereas CEO are not normally associated with building activities and interaction like HR. So that makes them a leader, HR.
Part of what I think is important, so to follow up on your point, Naveen, I think one of the things that, and I'll come to this towards the end, is being super clear about like where we can best play an important role. So let me kind of walk through a couple thoughts that I have about what we can do.
Yeah, just add a point to what Naveen said. I think a CEO, given their level and given the level of a company, a CEO would usually be informed of an employee if they're doing bad. Like, you'll never hear, oh yeah, look what this guy did, he did something good. Mostly it's they're getting notified of someone's bad performance. And I think it's important for HR to be able to communicate with the CEO anything good that an employee does, just to show that these people are actually delivering something good.
Yeah, I think so. That's a really great point, Ibrahim. And I actually want to I want to blow that out just a little bit, because I do think that there is a way in which, over the course of time, the human resources has evolved and changed. And all of you know this, right? So I'm only going to spend a half a second on this, but kind of HR in the past has been like inconsistent practices, largely operational, efficiency, right? So today it's about how do we actually think about more kind of how do we expand the organization from a global perspective, lower cost and standardization, more consistency, right, in terms of our work around talent, and more transparency. But not necessarily, those things can help us, but they don't necessarily lead to more strategy, more measurable impact, more better reputation for HR. So when we think about kind of the future and where is HR headed, we need to be more data driven talent decisions, right? That's kind of like, that's a key thing. If we actually want to be seen as a leader at the table, we need to make not just kind of talent decisions, but data-driven talent decisions, and be fluent in that. We need to be more efficient and customer-centric through our use of digital technology, right? We need to be more flexible through agile ways of working, which we've talked about already in terms of even this pandemic and what it's kind of taught us about how we need to be flexible and agile, right? And how do we kind of have the right support structures, and how we layer that almost like a phone, right? So the stable backbone of the phone, but then you have all the various apps that you have on it. So things move in your organization, right? Like apps move things, projects, people around, but there's a stable backbone, and HR provides that stable backbone. More flexible ways of accountability and people management, and then more of a strategic impact with the executive team. And this is what I want to get into now. I'm just going to share with you some thoughts and get your reaction to this. So my first thought around this is that businesses don't create value. People do, right? Businesses don't create value, but people do. And I think whether you make it, buy it, sell it, produce it, create it, develop it, innovate on it, it's always done through people, right? So people create the value for the organization. But that doesn't mean that everybody is contributing the same value. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. And so I want to be super clear. As a person and as a business, Great Place to Work, that truly believes that everybody needs to be engaged in the life of the business. We're talking about value creation, right? When we're talking about value creation, and I'm using it in a very particular way. Typically in most businesses, like 2% of the group are the value creators that drive value creation for the business. And the rest are either value enablers or value protectors. And so as HR people, we need to be very clear about whether the person that we're talking about is a value creator, a value enabler, or a value protector. Okay. The first thing we need to do is understand the value creation agenda from the CEO. And it's not necessarily about kind of revenue, right? It's not necessarily about revenue. It may be that we actually want to drive value creation by expanding in this market, right? Or we actually want to acquire these new businesses in capacity, or we actually want to kind of be acquired, right? We want to go IPO and be a public company, right? Public traded company. And so we have certain value drivers that we have on our value agenda. The CEO is very clear about this. And that's a conversation that the CEO has with the board of directors, right? What needs to happen in order to drive the most value creation for the business. What happens is that because HR is typically very focused on making sure that everybody has the right tools, the right resources, the right training, and follows the right policies and protocols, it's a flat and across the organization. And CEOs don't necessarily see that. They see the value of people. That's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying at all. Everybody has value, right? Intrinsic value. And from a Great Place to Work perspective, we would say we want to create a great workplace for everybody, not just for some people. But from a CEO's perspective, even in a company of 50,000 people, there's probably about 100 people that drive the value creation for the business. And it's not typically who you think it is, right? It may not be the people at the very top of the house, based upon title, or it may not be based upon kind of like their role within sales or something else like that. It could very well be that different people across the organization have their hands in creating the right value that aligns with the CEO's agenda. So one of the things that I think HR needs to do is pivot in a very sophisticated way. One is to create a great workplace so that everybody, regardless of what your role is, feels engaged and productive and contributes to the business, whether you're creator, protector, or enabler, because everybody has some role in the value creation chain. But HR needs to have a short list, kind of have your list of who are that 2%. Maybe it's up to 100 people if it's a huge organization that you work for that are actually driving the value for the business from the CEO's agenda. So what is your organization's value aspiration and drivers to achieve it? What are the critical roles and responsibilities that contribute to it? Do you have the best talent that matches to those roles, right? And do you have the right systems to mitigate talent risk to deliver on that agenda, right? That becomes kind of the HR thing. That's the conversation you have with the CEO. To actually drive the value, to drive kind of human resources and say, listen, we are indispensable to the life of this business. We're going to do two things really effectively. We're going to make sure that we're taking care of our people and creating a culture that really supports the best of everybody to contribute their best and be engaged in the life of the business. And at the same time, we're going to pay attention to the vital few, right? And figure out what actually needs to happen to ensure that we are delivering on the board and CEO's value agenda. So that's the controversial topic or position, but I wanted to raise that here because I think it's an important part of the conversation. And I think most HR folks are not really thinking about that. I think most HR folks are thinking like, okay, so how do I roll out a flexible work-life policy? How do I actually ensure that we have a hybrid model, which is important. It's absolutely important, right? But the CEO has an agenda about how they're going to create value for the business or for the organization. Even if they're a public entity, how are they going to create value for the ultimate stakeholders and the leadership of the country, right? And so the role of HR is to understand that value agenda, creation agenda, really deeply, and then manage the work around that. So let me kind of stop there for a second. I just kind of thrown out some thoughts, and I'm interested in hearing kind of reactions, thoughts, issues, concerns. I see some thumbs raised.
So that's a great point. Thank you for having an epiphany moment. So if it's not articulated or explicit, the CEO's agenda, is it our role in HR to assume or to kind of predict what that might be?
I think it's actually a conversation. So if there's not clarity well, okay, let me kind of take a step back.
And what kind of agenda might they be sharing? Because they have so many agendas in so many contexts.
Yep.
So it's such a big question.
So I think here's where you get into being an advisor, perhaps to the CEO, right? Mr. and Mrs. CEO, here's what I see, right? You're concerned about X, Y, and Z, right? A, B, C, and that's a lot. So as you think about the next 3 to 5 years in terms of how you want to build value in the business, is it A and Z or B and X? Actually, what parts of this? Help me understand kind of what you see as the CEO so that I can make sure that we're actually aligning the HR organization to that agenda, to that value agenda, right? So I think you call the question. I actually think you kind of and it may very well be that the CEO isn't as clear as they should be, right? Or it may be that they have an agenda that they articulate to some people, but they keep hidden from others, right? That's possible too. But I think it's important to actually raise the question, because what you're then doing as an executive, as an HR leader, is saying, this is important for me. I want to make sure that I'm contributing the most to you and to the business, right? And so I just want to make sure that there's clarity, strategic clarity. And as if I have, and strategic clarity, when I say strategic clarity, it's not about the strategy that's on the PowerPoint page, that's the 5 points. It's about, at the end of the day, because the board and the CEO has some priorities that they want to achieve about how they're going to build business and for the future. And again, it could be, we're gonna, given where we are, we want to acquire different other businesses. That's how we're going to build value, right? Or it could very well be that, listen, we actually, like I said, we want to go IPO. Or, as we go in the future, we're going to create this new whole set of different products, right? At Great Place to Work, for example, part of our value creation agenda over the last year and a half has been to adopt a whole new technology, right? A whole new technology platform that actually drives insight for our customers and our clients in a qualitatively better way than what we had before. And so we've had to realign the entire organization around this technology, right? That's that Great Place to Work. But every business has a value creation agenda. Again, even public firms, public organizations. So I think it's really important to raise the question and find out from the CEO. And if it's not clear and transparent, I'd ask. And what you could do is not simply say, well, I don't know what it is. What is it, right? But you probably have some assumptions, some guesses, some hypotheses, right? And come in and have that conversation. Say, here's kind of what I'm noticing. I just want to make sure that we're aligned. Is this what you see? Because what I want to do is I want to go off and make sure that we have the right players doing the right things in order to establish that value for the organization. I'm not sure if that makes sense, Rosanna, but that's kind of what goes through my head.
I can. Makes perfect sense. It's just thinking of the dynamics and the hierarchy that I'm part of, and kind of the corporate culture and navigating such a conversation. So it's kind of like just kind of processing what you're saying and thinking, reflecting on what you're saying. So thank you so much.
Sure. I think the other thing too, this is where there may be before you actually, I want to take a half a step back. It may very well be before you have that conversation where you call the question and figure out what is their value agenda. It may very well be that there needs to be some education about how you and human resources can help to enable that to happen, right? And so so Malavan and I will send some resources out to all of you after this call, along with your certificate. And there's some interesting resources that I'll include about how to begin to engage in a conversation that is somewhat educational in nature, but helps to reframe the discussion a little bit with your CEO about, here's kind of what here's kind of what I'm thinking about. I want to make sure we're aware of it together. Now let me talk with you. Then the next step is, let me talk with you about what the agenda is. And let's make sure that we're all really clear. Because like I mentioned, this article from Harvard Business Review kind of articulated this kind of triumvirate at the top, right? CEO, CFO, and CHRO. And those three folks are really kind of the pivotal points in the organization, right? And so
that's a hierarchy, right?
Yeah, so it's a hierarchy, but it's like what are the three people, or what are the three roles rather in the organization that really need to be kind of aligned and actually managing the business moving forward?
Yeah.
Okay. And oftentimes the CHRO is not actually included. And what Ram Charan kind of articulates is that the CHRO is absolutely vital. It's one of the three most important roles in terms of actually driving the organization forward. So let me kind of quickly kind of get to a couple other points, and then I'll we'll wrap up. I'm aware of the time.
If I may,
Michael, yes, Dorina, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Malavan. If I may, from my perspective, I think one of the issues where the conversation between the CEO and the CHRO will have a difficulty. It's because the transparency of the stakeholder. For the CEO nowadays able to be transparent.
Yeah.
The HRs. And I believe that's one of the main problems, because they do see us as transactional. We are good. We are best at that. We've proven over time, over and over, that we are mastering that, and we've been counted on that. You know, it's there's no doubt over that. But now with the change, and it's a rapid change, I don't believe the CEO, the stakeholders, actually they are not ready to extend that transparency, and especially with where the business going with the strategy. Yes, they are expecting us to step up, to be proactive, and to move in an agile way. But let's be honest, what agile means? Agile is moving fast before thinking. Let's try it. We see it. To be honest with you, we are seeing it in Qatar, with the government shifting everything on immigration and all the labor processes through a system. It's brilliant. It's ideal and should work at one point streamingly. But right now, what they are doing, easily it's described as an agile process. Let's put it out there, see how it goes, and we'll adjust as we go. But if you think about it, we HR, we are bounded by a structured procedures, and we are very proud of that. And that's why I agree with you. We look at ourselves as the best. And it's true, but only because we have the backbone of a structured mentality. We go by the book, where in an agility world methodology, you can't do that. You have to be flexible. But from our side, it's very hard to be flexible, because that leaves space to liabilities, a lot of liabilities that you can see every day, especially now with during COVID and after COVID. You've seen more and more, the company being exposed to so many liabilities that you can't control them.
Yeah, right.
Can I add to that? I have a question. What can you do if, let's say, you're handling the HR and you want to go by the book, but someone over you who is in a more senior position, who has higher authority than you, decides not to? How do you handle that?
Good question. I want that answer as well.
Yeah. So, yes. Or at the top of the hour.
We face the same issues, as far as I can see.
Yeah.
We need a support group.
Class. Go on, Michael.
I do want to be respectful of people's time, and so I think I'm willing to give this like another 10 minutes or so, right? So if you need to drop because you have other things you need to attend to, thank you for your time today. We will make sure that we get you the deck, and please let us know how we can do it. If you have extra 10 minutes, let's just kind of continue this conversation just a little bit longer, because I think it's valuable, right? Because I do think one of the thoughts that I have about this is that there's actually two very different principal roles that human resources needs to play. Okay, and one of them is exactly what you're talking about. It is the rules, the structure, because taking, for example, payroll and benefits. You can't mess with that. Let's talk about kind of like, human resources laws and regulations. You can't mess with that, right? So there are certain things that are absolutely like Irina was saying, is like the backbone of your phone. It's a structure. You can't mess with the operating system, or you lose your phone. Right? That has to stay intact. And so the conversation I would be having, and I would have this on your auto repeat. So keep saying the same message again and again and again and again, wherever you go, right? We have two functions in human resources. One is to identify those things that are structured, clear, need to be kind of driven by process, great process, and make sure that's super efficient, right? And that we make that as quickly digital and low cost as we can. Efficiency key. And then there's the effective piece of HR, and that is the talent, right? That is the strategic conversations. That's some of the stuff we've been talking about now. And I would make sure that you continue to hold both of those, and wherever you go, again, have it on auto repeat, almost like constant messaging, right? I think those are two different things, because, and let's not get those two things confused. And I think to articulate and educate, right, kind of our colleagues, like HR has two different roles. And traditionally we've been known for this role over here, which is the rules, the regulations, the kind of the structure, that kind of stuff. And it's important, but we also have this other role over here. And so if it's option A, if you're coming to me with a question about A, group A, I'm going to give you a group A question, that answer. If you're coming to me with a group B question, I'm going to give you a group B answer, right? So we just get very, very clear with people that we engage with. Okay, so are they coming to me with option A or option B? Because this is where I get into in terms of the stuff that's in front of you right now, right? If you want to be more strategic, you have to begin to embed analytics across HR. You have to manage HR as a business, right? That's absolutely vital. And then create that magnet for talent, and then develop trustworthy leaders. And there's a way to do that so everybody, and it's the same thing in terms of the A versus B, because the A stuff is where everybody has value. It's creating a great workplace, right? You want to have a culture that is for everybody. You don't get very far very fast in this world if you have a lousy culture. And honestly, Malavan and I can tell you, we've been into lots of organizations as a great place to work, and there's a lot of not great cultures, right? That are just leaving value and money on the table because things are just not working out well, right? So that's absolutely true. That's an A column issue. The B column issue is this value creation agenda. And how do we actually have those kinds of conversations? And what I'm positing is that in order to be able to do that, these are four kind of strategic needs. The last thing that I just want to say is that's kind of related to this is, I'll just go past this, is these practical tips, because a couple times one of raised this. Avoid HR speak. Malavan, if you can actually sort of mute whatever.
Yes. Let me just bear with me.
Hello, you're unmuted.
There you go. Okay, Anwar is now kind of muted. So number 2 is avoid HR speak. I think we've created this whole language and this whole way of thinking about things that may actually not be helpful to us. Who knows what a COE is? We all do, right? How many CEOs are thinking about COE? Very few, right? And then lastly, kind of like number 4, identify what's important, but not adding value. And when I say value, I'm talking about kind of the value agenda, and work to address that, because see that as a column A issue, not a column B issue, right? And I think those are the important things when we're talking about like this issue about how do you drive greater value in the business from human resources. Now, your particular experience may be similar or different to what I've shared already, right? And it's probably worth a follow-up conversation. And I'm willing to have that with any of you. Like if you want to have a follow-on discussion with me and say, hey, there's this particular issue. I also have some very smart people that that are on my team. I see a couple kind of even online right now, Malavan, Ibrahim. There's a couple of really smart folks that understand this stuff really well. And Cheryl's online. So we're happy to have a follow-up conversation with you about any of this. But I do think having the, kind of that clarity, and then raising this up with the CEO and say, listen, I know, there's no reason why you can't actually say this, because I've actually seen HR, I've coached HR leaders to say this. We traditionally in HR, I get it. I've been in HR, so I know, Mr. CEO, Mrs. CEO, that we tend to deal with column A issues, right? but I also know you have a column B, kind of agenda. And so I want to have a conversation with you about how we can make sure that we're actually adding value in that way.
So Michael, can I ask you just, sorry for interrupting, can I ask if after this webinar is over, will we be receiving the PowerPoint as an attachment or?
Yes, you'll receive the deck, you'll receive some additional resources, some articles, some links. You'll receive the certificate of participation.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Sure thing. Okay. And again,
hello, Michael. Hi,
yes,
how are you today?
Ibrahim, this is one of the smart guys that works with me that is jumping on. Yes, sir.
Hi, how are you today? And hello, everybody. I'm so happy to see this conversation happening. And I mean, you're not alone. We always hear this conversation. Sorry to introduce myself. My name is Ibrahim Mugharbul, and I'm the Managing Director for Great Place to Work in Qatar and UAE, Kuwait, and Oman. We hear all these conversations, all these inputs from different HR groups and organizations in the region about their challenges. And I'm going to tell you this, you're not alone. Like, this is where you need to be thinking about, you're not alone. Every organization have similar issues, have similar challenges. But what's more important is to thinking how we can be practical about it and how can you actually, get out from that challenge and make sure that you have the right solution in front of you. We want to support you in the best way possible. So I'm just gonna follow up on what Michael just said. We want to support you. If you want to have a follow-up conversation on this, we're more than happy to have a one-on-one with each one of you to speak about your challenges. COVID has not been easy, and we understand that. It added more to the crazy mix that you already have, and we know that. However, what's more important is how you can showcase results. How can you make sure that your business is driven, and how can you make sure your business is successful? And that's what everybody is interested in. And this is what we need to be focusing on, and this is how we have done it with other organizations. And we definitely want to support you on the same perspective. Michael, back to you.
Yeah. If you haven't had a chance to go ahead and put your email and your name in the chat, please do so we can send you the stuff. And as I said, we will make sure that we send the deck along with some resources and the certificate of completion. And really, like Ibrahim said, we're open to that conversation, how we can help either with column A issues or column B issues. I think Great Place to Work has much more of a column A focus because we want to make sure we have a great workplace for everybody. But as an executive, as a leader, which I know all of you are, right? The question becomes, how do we actually drive value for our business? And how do I show up in a way to have the conversation? And the last thing I might say to wrap this up is that kind of pretend as if, this is how I coach some leaders, pretend as if you already are that HR leader that's engaged in this kind of a conversation. And so wherever you go, you talk about how you are focused on the talent agenda to create value for the business or for the organization. Use those words, right? And then see kind of like what begins to happen. Because I think in some ways we have to be able to influence, and the way we influence is by kind of like how we role model and what we talk about. So rather than talk about kind of compliance, regulations, rules, answer the column A questions if you're asked, but pivot and start talking about column B, right? How do we actually add value to the business, right? And have that conversation. Okay, my friends, I could go on for a lot longer. I would love to hear more perspectives, and because I think all of you have lots of insight. We will continue to do some of these webinars. I know Malavan has been thinking about this already. We want to make sure that we open the conversation, and we want to make sure that we're being helpful advisors and thought partners to all of you. So expect to hear more from us. I hope everybody has a really great evening wherever you are in the world, and get ready for the week ahead. It's going to be an exciting one. Take good care of yourselves and be well.
Thank you. Michael, can we allow 2 questions, Michael? I'm sure